Hello and welcome to Branches. I'm Pastor Dan, and thanks so much for joining us today. Just a week after Easter now, and I don't want to just move on from that. I think it's such an important story and such a part of our faith. I'd like to just make sure we stay there for just a little bit longer. And so I want to take you back to the days right after the crucifixion of Jesus and to the day that he was actually resurrected. The word hadn't really gotten out yet of what had happened. And so we're going to pick up the story in Luke chapter 24, and I'll invite you to read along with me. We read this. It says, "That same day, two of Jesus' followers were walking to the village of Emmaus, 7 miles from Jerusalem. As they walked along, they were talking about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things, Jesus himself suddenly came and began walking with them, but God kept them from recognizing him." It's interesting here, the resurrected Christ is often unrecognizable to the people who knew him best, who walked with him. Mary in the garden thought he was just a gardener. Peter on the beach wasn't really sure if that was the Lord. So many times the disciples are like, is this really him? It's just interesting that the resurrected Christ isn't always what people thought he would look like. And so pick it up in verse 17. It says this, "He asked them, 'What are you discussing so intently as you walk along?' The men stopped short, sadness written across their faces. Then one of them, Cleopas, replied, 'You must be the only person in Jerusalem who hasn't heard about all the things that have happened here the last few days.'" Essentially, what do you live under a rock? He said, "What things?" Jesus asked him. "The things that happened to Jesus," they said, "the man from Nazareth." He said, "He was a prophet who did powerful miracles, and he was a mighty teacher in the eyes of God and all the people. But our leading priests and other religious leaders handed him over to be condemned to death, and they crucified him." Now listen to this, so important. They say, "We had hoped he was the Messiah who had come to rescue Israel." This all happened 3 days ago. I just want to point out, this was a picture here of deep disappointment. They were leaving the place, they were leaving the city, Jerusalem, where they had such high hopes for this man they knew as Jesus. He was supposed to be the Messiah. And I want you to pause for just a minute and try and put yourself in their shoes or their sandals for a moment. Think back on your greatest disappointment. When was it? What was the point of your greatest disappointment? Was it the moment perhaps you knew a relationship, a marriage was over? Was it the moment you closed a business or a dream that came to an end? Was it the moment you got the news that a loved one had passed and you had been hoping that they would be healed? If you can, just try and put yourself in their place. And as they're walking back from Jerusalem, try to feel that deep disappointment that you've experienced in your own life. See, when they entered the city, it was just a few days before that there was a jubilant atmosphere in Jerusalem. Jesus is riding in on a donkey. The crowds are going wild. You are there standing among the crowds, hearing the people around you, cheering and singing and proclaiming Hosanna. The government, the soldiers are just standing there allowing all this to happen. You have such hope that a revolution is here. It's right around the corner. It's about to happen. The Messiah is here. Such high hopes. You'd heard stories from your grandparents. For years you've heard the stories about how the Messiah was going to come and save the people. And now you are lucky enough to be alive at the precise moment in history when it's about to take place. So not only that, you've gotten to meet Jesus. You've gotten to see him up front. You saw miracles happen. You saw blind people see. You saw lame people walk. You saw demons cast out of people. You saw the sick healed. You saw food multiply. You were convinced. You had seen this with your own eyes. You had gone all in. Jesus was the Messiah. Your hope was there. And then stunningly, shockingly, is betrayed by one of your friends, by one of the people that had walked with you, by one of the 12, by one of the people that you had looked up to. But still you were sure. Despite all that, Jesus, even as you knew that he was in the Romans' hands, you knew that Jesus was going to show his power, that this was going to be the coronation for the king. But then you watched as Jesus simply just let it happen. He didn't do anything. The thoughts are swirling in your head. What's going on? Why doesn't he do something? Surely there's another miracle coming, something else that Jesus is waiting and waiting and waiting and nothing. And nothing. Jesus died. You saw it. You saw him be taken down from the cross. You saw him be wrapped, put in a grave, and a stone rolled in front of it. And you're just walking home, making the journey back from Jerusalem to your city, walking home. You've given up. It's over. Deep disappointment. It's on full display. You saw him die. It's gone. The crushing pain of disappointment cuts deep. Hope unfulfilled, we all know, is one of the deepest pains. It's the pain of what could have been. It's a tragic and devastating letdown. It's what should have been and what could have been. He was supposed to be the Messiah. We had hoped. They're saying this. I've heard that story before, as you may have. You may have heard this story about the Jesus showing up to these two walking on the road to Emmaus. And a few weeks ago, one of our intern here at the church, Stephen DeTrolio, who you got to hear speak during our Branches video several times, shared some devotional videos that the president, Craig Barnes, president of Princeton's Theological Seminary, had put out in the week leading up to Easter and the time leading up. And in them, he made a simple observation that it shook me. It absolutely gripped me. He said this, Dr. Barnes said this, he says, on the Emmaus Road, the disciples were deeply disappointed. But then he said this, he said, we all had hopes for what Jesus was supposed to do. We've all had hopes for what Jesus was supposed to do. In that moment, I had to pause because I knew exactly what he was talking about. There have been countless times in my life where I've been disappointed because Jesus and God didn't do what I wanted. Because they didn't do what I hoped, what I expected, what I thought they should have. And every time I felt that, I questioned, why doesn't God do it the way I want him to? Why doesn't he do? And there's this measure of disappointment that begins to form in my heart. Why didn't Jesus heal when I prayed? And why didn't he fix what was wrong? And why doesn't he just intervene and do what I know he can do, what I know what he's done before? I've seen it with my own eyes. Why doesn't Jesus just say the word and make it all better? See, what the pain of disappointment reveals is this. What was true for the disciples back then on that road as they journeyed with Jesus is just as true for us today. We need to rethink who Jesus is. We need to rethink Jesus. When we find ourselves deeply disappointed in God and what we perceive to be his inactivity, we are more than likely in the precise place where we need to rethink who he is and what he came to do. Often when I do premarital counseling for couples that are anticipating an upcoming wedding, I discuss expectations as part of one of our sessions. Expectations for how they expect each other to relate, what they expect each other to do. Expectations are a huge part of our relationships. And what's happening here with these two disciples, and with many of the disciples, with all of Jesus' followers, is a profound case of unmet expectations. Jesus was supposed to save them. He was supposed to overthrow the government. He was supposed to usher in a new era of religious power. He was supposed to prove to the world that God is supreme. He was supposed to show everybody that he was right. There would be no doubt. God would show up in force and everything was going to be made right. The oppressed people were going to be set free. Israel was going to experience and rejoice. The Messiah was going to liberate them on this earth. And yet here they are, leaving their hopes and dreams in a tomb, dead, in the rearview mirror as they try to comprehend how it could have gone so wrong, how everything they hoped just didn't materialize. Their expectations were wrong. They were off. And to be clear here, their expectations for Jesus were not too high. So here's the thing, the truth we need to think about. Their expectation for Jesus were far too low. Far too low. They wanted Jesus to overthrow the government. He came to overthrow hell itself. They wanted Jesus to change their circumstances, but he came to change them. They wanted Jesus to make their lives comfortable. He came to make their lives count. See, we know that Jesus gave his life for us. We talk all the time about how much he sacrificed for us and how awesome Jesus is and how much he's done for us and how much good he's done for us. But if we're honest, there are parts of us that wish today that Jesus would do more. That he would do more. That Jesus would do more to change things here and now. And we'd never say it like that, but essentially, we're disappointed with salvation. It's not enough. We're disappointed by eternal life and by hope and peace and justice and forgiveness and all the things we've identified as good news. All those things we say are good news. It's not that we're not grateful. We're grateful for those things, but we would just like a little bit more. We wouldn't mind more if Jesus would just do more for us. And the irony is that the more we want God to do is lesser than what he came to do for us. But our expectations being too low, we become disappointed with the more that God has done for us. It's as backwards as it sounds, but our expectations set too low lead to disappointment in a God who has done more, which is why we need to rethink Jesus. He didn't come to meet our expectations. He came to raise them. If you're feeling disappointed in what God is not doing for you, the solution is not to lower your expectations, it's to elevate them. If you're hoping for financial wealth, that's too low. He didn't come to make you wealthy. Jesus came to make you generous. Rethink Jesus. If you're hoping for physical health, that's too low. He didn't come to make you live a long life. He came to make the most of your living. Rethink Jesus. If you're hoping for comfort and ease, that's way too low. He didn't come to make your life easy, but to make your life unshakable. Rethink Jesus. If you are hoping for the approval of this world, that is too low. He didn't come to make you popular with people. He came to make you right with the creator of the universe. See, if we're hoping for anything less than God's highest purposes for us, then we will be disappointed, ironically, with the greater things that he has done, is doing, and will do for us. So as you gather in your groups, I encourage you, have the courage to be honest. The disciples on the Emmaus Road didn't hold back when they were expressing their thoughts and their feelings to Jesus. They didn't know it was him. Truthfully, they didn't know it was him. But I think we can take comfort in knowing that Jesus understood their disappointment then, just like he will understand our disappointment now. And he won't leave us there. He won't leave us there. He will lift our eyes to see the unimaginable goodness we didn't have the capacity to expect. It's a good time to rethink Jesus. God bless you as you talk.